Right now, someone with less ability than you is winning. Why? Because they appear more certain, they speak without pause, they act as if they deserve it all, and the world believes them. Meanwhile, you hesitate, you overthink, you wait for the perfect moment, the perfect words, the perfect feeling. And while you wait, someone else takes what could have been yours. Confidence is not just a trait, it's a weapon. And if you don't wield it, someone else will use it against you. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The bold move forward. Even if they lack the skill, the hesitant remain behind, no matter how talented they are, because power does not belong to the most gifted, it belongs to the most certain. This isn't just another motivational talk. This is about control. You will learn how to erase hesitation, how to speak with authority, and how to move like someone who expects obedience. Pay attention, because from this moment, weakness will no longer be tolerated. It will be replaced. You weren't born hesitant. You were shaped into it, through repetition, through reward, through rules, trained to obey, trained to seek approval, trained to ask, is this okay? What lives inside you right now isn't strength, it's submission. A servant conditioned to please, programmed to comply, a loyal follower who fears judgment and waits for permission. That voice in your head, the one that hesitates, that doubts, that apologizes before speaking, that is not you. That is the inner servant. And unless you silence him, you will never be free. Machiavelli didn't whisper, he commanded. He didn't wait for approval, he acted, and others adapted. He didn't request power, he took it, because he knew those who ask don't deserve it. Your transformation begins with inversion. When you want to shrink, expand. When you want to explain, pause. When you want to apologize, hold your ground. Dangerous confidence doesn't come from waiting until you feel ready. It comes from doing what your inner servant would never attempt. You walk faster, you take up space, you stop nodding, you stop softening your tone. You speak as if your words are decisions, not suggestions. Confidence is not a mindset, it is an identity, and that identity is forged through defiance, not against the world, but against the weaker version of you that still submits. So here's the first rule: if it makes you small, eliminate it. A thought, a habit, a person, remove it. If it makes you hesitate, confront it. If it makes you weak, reject it. If it seeks to be liked, dismiss it. The world tells you to be nice, polite, agreeable. But here is the Machiavellian truth. Nice men are tools. They get used, replaced, discarded. Powerful men are not nice. They are precise, deliberate, controlled, calculated. And it starts with silencing the inner voice, still begging for approval. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You need only one thing: the willingness to become feared, not by others, but by your former self. Because once the servant is destroyed, the ruler emerges. Powerful men do not enter with noise. They arrive with presence, not through constant talking, but through stillness, silence, and their gaze. You don't need to be widely known. You don't need to be liked. You need only the ability to shift the atmosphere the moment you arrive. That is how a man carries himself when he owns the room. Not because he's told he does, but because he behaves as though he always has. Machiavelli observed this in the royal courts. The true rulers weren't always the kings. Sometimes it was the quiet figure in the corner. He rarely spoke, but when he did, every ear turned toward him. Silence is power. You think constant talking shows dominance. It doesn't, it shows predictability. The quiet man is the threat, because no one knows what he's planning. When you enter a room, you don't seek approval. You don't search for permission. You watch, you listen. You let others rush to prove themselves while you calculate. Your posture speaks before your words do. You move slowly, not out of doubt, but because you are never in a hurry. Predators don't sprint unless it's time to strike. Until then, they remain calm, steady, prepared. Most men don't notice how quickly they move, how often they interrupt, how desperately they try to impress, because they are still beneath judgment. But when you move like you own the room, you don't speak to impress. You speak to decide. Every word you say carries weight. Every sentence sounds final. People listen differently. They don't argue. They align with you, and when others speak, you wait. You let them reveal themselves, their desires, their doubts, their weaknesses. The one who speaks first usually gives away the most. And once you see that, you can bend them. You don't chase attention. You generate gravity. At this level, confidence isn't about being liked. It's about making others question their own stance simply by being near you. You carry yourself as if you've already won, not with arrogance, but with certainty. Because a man who has chosen himself no longer competes. If they respect you, good. If they don't, even better. Because true power is found in indifference to approval. And if the room wasn't yours when you entered, by the time you leave, it will feel like it was. Not because you demanded it, but because you never had to. Words are not just sounds, they are weapons. Most men use them poorly, speaking as if they're asking for permission to exist. You can recognize them instantly. The rising tone at the end of sentences, the nervous laughter, the endless, they think, maybe, I'm not sure. They apologize for speaking at all. That is not communication, that is self-sabotage. Machiavelli understood the truth. Power lies not only in what you say, but in how you say it. Speak as if you cannot be denied, and people stop analyzing your words. They yield to your certainty. Because here's the reality. People are not logical. They are emotional. They don't follow facts. They follow conviction. If you sound certain, they assume you're right. If you hesitate, they assume you're not worth hearing. So, what does a Machiavellian voice sound like? It's steady, calm, and conclusive. You speak as if your words are not open for debate, as if every sentence is a final decision. You speak like someone who expects to be obeyed. It doesn't matter if the room is filled with experts. If you sound like the conclusion, they will defer. That's the first rule. Sound like the end, not the beginning. And here's what most never realize. You don't need to speak often to earn respect. In fact, the more you say, the more chances you give others to analyze you, challenge you, or worse, stop taking you seriously. Speak less, mean more. When you do speak, remove all softness. No filler, no disclaimers, no apologies. Never say, I'm just saying, or I could be wrong, or I don't know if this makes sense. Those are escape routes for the uncertain. Eliminate them, say what you mean, then leave it there. Let others handle the silence that follows. Because silence, after a strong statement, is powerful, it dares others to challenge you, and most won't. Why? Because they fear what else you might say. Understand this. Your tone is your true message. The words are surface level, but your calm, deliberate, grounded tone tells people exactly where you stand in the hierarchy. If you want to rise, lower your pitch, slow your pace, remove nervous energy, speak like someone with nothing to prove and everything under control, like a man who has already decided and expects the world to adjust. You don't win conversations by being louder. You win by speaking in a way that makes your words feel like facts, not opinions. This is how rulers speak, how commanders speak, how kings in exile speak before reclaiming their thrones. And if someone challenges you, never defend, redirect. Don't argue, don't explain, don't justify. Simply say, I disagree, or better, that's incorrect. Then move on. Because when you refuse to debate, you signal something unsettling, that your reality is not up for negotiation. That is how you control a room without raising your voice. Confidence isn't volume, it's gravity. It's the invisible weight behind your words, the unspoken assumption that when you talk, others listen. When you speak, the room should feel it, not from arrogance or noise, but from certainty. You're not trying to be right. You're speaking like someone who cannot be wrong. You're not trying to be heard. You're speaking like someone who doesn't need agreement, because eventually agreement will come. That's power, and from now on, that's how you speak, or you remain silent. Confidence without control is decoration. You can walk tall, speak well, carry presence. But if someone can trigger you with one sentence, you are not powerful, you are exposed. This is where most men fail. They master appearance, they master speech, but their emotions still belong to others. A word of disrespect makes them react. A compliment makes them soften. A silence makes them doubt themselves. You are not free until you master the invisible war, the one inside your mind, and that begins with reshaping your identity. Machiavelli understood this in the courts of power. He didn't fear enemies. He feared dependence, emotional or otherwise. He didn't trust affection. He trusted control, because once people know what influences you, they know how to control you. And once they can control you, you are no longer a threat. You're predictable, and predictable men are discarded the moment they lose value. So here's the transformation. You stop being the man who reacts, and you become the man who calculates. If someone insults you, you don't explain. You observe. You extract information. What do they want from you? What are they hiding? If someone praises you, you don't melt. You analyze. Why now? What is their motive? If someone ignores you, you don't panic. You grow colder. Silence becomes your weapon, not your weakness. This is what it means to be psychologically unreachable, not emotionless, but unshakable. You still feel, but you act only when it serves your purpose. When tested, you don't lash out. You show no visible discomfort, because your mind is not a public square, it is a fortress, and only you decide who enters. That is how manipulation ends. Most men are easy to control. Tell them they're not enough. They over-explain, praise them, and they chase you. Withdraw from them emotionally, and they beg for attention. That is not power, that is programming. And until you break the code, you remain a tool in someone else's hands. So how do you rewire? You kill the need to be understood. That is the root weakness. The desire to explain, to be seen, to be validated. That is what makes you controllable. Burn it. You don't exist to be understood. You exist to move the world strategically, carefully, quietly. You kill the fear of rejection, because the Machiavellian mind does not chase acceptance. It controls access. You don't want to be invited in. You want people to wonder what it means if they're shut out. And you kill the habit of reacting emotionally. Emotions are real, but irrelevant unless used as weapons. Anger becomes fuel, insult becomes leverage, doubt becomes silence, until results prove otherwise. This is how powerful men are built. They don't become robotic, they become undeniable. Once no one can move you emotionally, the only thing left is for them to watch you act with precision and fear what you'll do next. Let others chase peace and understanding. You chase clarity and control, because the world does not care how you feel. It only responds to what you project: certainty, direction, gravity. And when your identity becomes unshakable, you become dangerous. Not because you're loud, not because you're violent, but because you are unreachable. And those around you will try. They will test you. They'll praise you. They'll ignore you. They'll test you. But none of it matters. You remain steady, cold, calm, calculated. Over time, they stop trying to influence you because they realize something unsettling. You are the one person they cannot move. This is the final transformation. It's not about posture or speech or image. It's about identity. You are no longer shaped by others. You shape the room. You shape the result. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be accepted. You don't need anything from anyone because you belong to no one, and that's what makes you untouchable. Rejection feels like injury to the weak. To the powerful, it's a signal, a gift, a reminder from the world that you were too available, too obvious, too eager, good. Now you know what must be removed. Understand this, rejection is never personal, it's positional. People reject what they believe they can live without. If they said no, it means they think they lost nothing. That's not an insult, it's information. Now you know their place and your own, which means you can position yourself to strike later when they are exposed and you are untouchable. Step 1. Never show it affects you. The moment you display pain, they win. It's not even about them. It's about your reputation. A Machiavellian mind doesn't panic when a door closes. It makes the room colder. You weren't rejected. They were disqualified from access to you. Rejection only exists when you acknowledge it. So you don't react, you evolve. Step 2. Withdraw your presence as a weapon. What happens when something taken for granted disappears? Its value becomes clear. That's exactly what you do after rejection. You vanish. No explanations, no farewells, just absence. And while they feel the void, you build. Machiavelli wrote, "Men should be either treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for small injuries, but not for severe ones. So don't wound them, make them irrelevant. Let your silence speak louder than words. Let them wonder where you went, how far you've risen, and if they ever truly had access at all." Step 3. Reframe the story. Rejection only has power if it looks like you were chasing. Change the narrative, not for them, but for yourself. You weren't rejected. You chose to remove yourself from a game too small for you. You allowed them to say no because you were testing their perception. You gave them one chance to recognize value. They failed. That failure gave you all the clarity you needed. Now you move on, and you rise. Step 4. Turn rejection into control. Here is where you win. Rejection gives clarity. Most people live in confusion, unsure who respects them, who uses them, who fears them. Rejection clears that fog instantly. Now you know who is blind. Now you know where your influence hasn't reached. So refine your edge, sharpen your image, increase your value until the same people who dismissed you are forced to explain themselves when your name comes up, and when they return, they will. You won't even need to reject them. You've already risen beyond their reach. That is real control. Silent, permanent, precise. Step 5. Weaponize your comeback. The goal is never revenge. Revenge is emotional. Machiavellian power is measured and deliberate. You don't chase payback. You let time handle it. You reappear only when your presence itself creates unease. When your success is visible, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. When the very person who rejected you must now watch you dominate the space they thought you couldn't enter. You say nothing. No sarcasm, no pride, no anger, only silence, or at most, a glance. Because now you're not seeking acceptance, you set the standard. Final word, rejection is not defeat. It is a filter, a test, a fire that shows you what to remove, what to cut, and who to leave behind. Remember this, you weren't rejected, you were redirected toward a version of yourself that doesn't ask twice, doesn't hesitate, and doesn't wait to be chosen. Now build quietly and return as a force they cannot refuse, even if they want to. You've been rebuilt, not motivated, not inspired, but restructured from within. You killed self-doubt, not with words, but with movement. You didn't wait to feel ready. you acted. And you learned that power doesn't belong to the flawless, it belongs to the decisive. You turned rejection into energy. You stopped chasing approval. Now others feel the cost of losing you. You became scarce, strategic, and silent, and they noticed. You stopped entering rooms to be accepted. Now you command them with presence, with composure, with precision. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak as though no one can afford to disagree. Above all, you rewired your identity. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer easily swayed. You've become unreachable, psychologically untouchable. They can't provoke you. They can't tempt you. They can't shake you because you belong to no one. And that makes you unforgettable. That's what creates a legend. Not noise, not fame, but silence, clarity, and discipline. You don't announce your transformation. They feel it in your walk, your tone, your absence. You've become the man others watch quietly. The one who used to chase, now pursued. The one who used to ask, now deciding. The one who no longer seeks approval because he became the measure. So no, this was never just about confidence. This was about dominance, mental, emotional, and psychological. You are not here to fit in. You are here to move the pieces, bend the room, and leave an impression, even in silence. Because legends don't beg, they don't explain, they exist. And the world adjusts around them. Final command, like this video if you're done chasing. Subscribe if you're ready to become the kind of man who can't be controlled, can't be predicted, and can never be forgotten. Because this isn't self-help. This is strategy, and you just became the weapon.